One thing we didn't talk about too much is just the surprises we had in the Assembly. Assemblywoman Hardy, big surprises you had when we're talking about the process of the legislative process.
Well, I was very surprised pleasantly, referring to Assemblyman Levitt's talking about our training. We went in there on day one. After you go through the training, you think, oh my gosh, I'm really going to walk in and know what I'm doing, and you really do. You can sit in a committee, you know what's going on, you know how to participate, you know the process. And so I was really surprised and happy that I knew what I was doing. And I also found how quickly you learn about the different policy topics. You know, I'm not a construction expert, I've never worked in that industry, or insurance, or healthcare for that matter. And you know, you sit and you listen to the people present, and you talk to the lobbyists and colleagues, and by the end you think, wow, I can have an intelligent conversation about this or that, and you really understand it. Not that you're an expert by any means, but your knowledge grew greatly, and you can go forward and build on that. So those are two things I was really surprised about.
And Assemblyman Levitt, is that just by sitting in the committee meetings and the floor sessions and kind of learning, or are you poring over all the documentation? And I've looked at some of the bills, the supporting documentation can be extensive to kind of get that type of knowledge.
You read a lot. You read a lot, and then and if you really want to understand it, you go to the sponsor of the bill or one of the co-sponsors of the bill, or if you know that it was a third party that formulated the bill, you go there. You learn a lot about the bill. You have to read it. I mean, that's something that was not surprising, but I felt like I was in law school all over again. You know, you just read mountains and mountains and mountains of information, and oftentimes it's right before class, you know, that you're reading this information, because you're reading through, you know, you see the night before, my 8 o'clock committee is got these 4 bills, and so you're reading them, and some of them are thick, some of them are not so thick, and you're formulating, you know, your opinions about the bill, and then you're listening to testimony and taking that knowledge that you've learned the night before, the morning before, if you come in at 5 a.m. and pour over the bills. But yeah, I think you learn as you learned as you went, but you knew going in, read the bills. You know, unless you just want to sit in committee and listen and be a spectator, and that's not something I don't think any of us were interested in doing.
And I'm sure something that the training did not prescribe.
No, they said read the bills in the training. They really reinforced that. So you're right on that one.
Assemblywoman Bacchus, you had a lot of successes sponsoring and co-sponsoring bills. A lot of yours went through. What kind of challenges did you have, though, in the process?
I think the biggest challenge that I learned is, if you remove your fiscal notes, always let leadership know, because that was just a part that they don't really train you for. You understand that there's going to be fiscal notes, but when they remove, I think I had one bill, it may have been Speaker Frierson's, because I had 2 tracks. I dropped my 6 BDRs. I think I killed 2 of them myself and carried 4, and then I was assisting Speaker Frierson with carrying 4 bills that pertain to foster care, just as something I'm passionate about. And so when you work to get rid of those fiscal notes, it's always key to let leadership know, or your bill could just kind of go on a pile because funding is so limited.
I'm sorry, can I ask what are fiscal notes? What constitutes a fiscal note?
So when your bill is going to cost the state money, it's going to have a fiscal fiscal note attached to it. And so one of the bills that I had going forward was to ensure that children in foster care could continue going to their school after they finish elementary school, where they were originally zoned, as opposed to going to another school for junior high where their foster parent is, to keep them in their same community. And that bill was going to cost some money, and it ended up disappearing. But then I had another bill that also was going to go on the chopping block, because likewise was going to cost money, but I had already gotten rid of any of the fiscal notes from the agencies. So each agency has to submit to the Legislative Council Bureau what the cost is going to be associated for that agency with respect to that bill. And I saved that one bill.
And what is that bill?
That other bill kind of goes along the lines of the other one, with making sure foster kids are being transported to school. This one pertained to, where are we recruiting foster parents in our community? Are we trying to keep foster kids in the same community they were raised in, so they can keep going to their same school, be near their brothers and sisters? And so it was more of an agency oversight as to looking at where they're recruiting foster parents at this time.
And Assemblyman Watts, you too, BDRs that were successful. What's one of the high points for you?
Yeah, one of the highlights for me would probably be Assembly Bill 163, which is a water conservation measure. it was a bill that I really cared a lot about bringing into the session, and then one that I worked really hard with people across the aisle and different stakeholders to make sure that we got the policy in the best possible place, and it was signed into law. And it makes sure that for some of our new development that we have some of the strongest water conservation policy in the country. It's one of the most important resources that we have, and I think it's important that we have some guidelines in place so that we use it responsibly. Also make sure that our utilities are being wise with the way they use their water, and that we're stopping leaks and things like that, which end up costing us all money. So that's something that I'm really proud of. And to Assemblywoman Bax's point about fiscal notes, that is a part of the process that you kind of learn about. All the money gets allocated towards the end. And so if your bill costs the state money, you're waiting until the very last minute to see if you're going to be able to get it through. And so I had another bill, Assembly Bill 364, which makes it easier for people who live in mobile homes to sell and transfer those by streamlining some of the titling processes. And I put out the idea as I originally had it, and it was going to cost the state $100,000. And here's an example of how you address that. So I sat down with the Housing Division, and we talked about it and kind of figured out some areas where there might have been misunderstandings about how it would be applied, figured out some changes to the language to kind of make it clear so that it still got done what I wanted it to do, but made sure it wasn't going to put more of a burden on the agency, and got the fiscal note reduced to $10,000 on that bill, and that was able to help get that through into law.
And Assemblywoman Hardy, high points for some of your bill draft requests that you had.
Like I said, I had AB 141, which allows pharmacists and pharmacies to share with patients the least expensive way that they can get their drug, whether it's an alternative drug or a generic drug. And so, that bill, I think from day one, we had lobbyists and people in industry, from pharmacies to pharma to hospitals, doctors, everyone coming in, we want to talk about this bill, we want to talk about this bill. So sometimes you don't realize, you have this, that's simple, right? Just allow a pharmacy to tell someone the least expensive way to get a drug. And then all these people start coming in, all the stakeholders, and you have to work with them, and the intent is at the end you have a bill that does what you wanted it to do, but that everyone can agree with. And Glenn and I spent weeks with, this one and that one. And then we got to the Senate side. People we'd never even heard from came up with a problem. And we're like, where were you, 3 weeks ago? And so it's just, again, building relationships and compromising, which, people sometimes don't like that word. They think, you shouldn't be compromising. But, you don't compromise certain values and beliefs, but sometimes you've got to compromise certain points so that you get something done. And like I said, with the ultimate intent of what you wanted. Yeah. And so that was something I learned about. Oh my goodness, you have this bill and then all the people that it affects, and you've got to work with all of them.
Yep. Assemblyman Levitt, just that the lobbyists as part of this equation right here, it's not something we talked about on the show, but we were discussing before the show there might have been 1,200 lobbyists that were around in Carson City. What kind of direct contact do you have with lobbyists when you're developing a bill like this that we're talking about?
It varies. And I thank you for not asking me the bill question, because I started growing this beard mid-session and said I would shave it when a bill I authored went into law. Well, I'm still growing the beard, so that explains it. But to your lobbyist question, it varies. Sometimes there's stakeholders but not lobbyists that care about your bill. Sometimes, your bill isn't important enough to anyone for them to do anything, but sometimes it's a lobbyist coming on behalf of a stakeholder saying, this is a problem that my client has, my stakeholder has. Can we put together something that will help alleviate this problem? And so sometimes you bring forth legislation that is the idea is not your own. It's a problem that maybe a constituent had or a stakeholder for a lobbyist had, and so in that scenario, you have a lot of contact with them because they're helping navigate the bill, they're helping get all the information about the bill, so it can have a smooth transition. I had 2 or 3 bills that were brought from stakeholders in my district through lobbyists that they wanted certain things to help them operate their business a little more effectively. And so in that situation, the lobbyist is your contact between, because you don't necessarily have the contact directly with the constituent or the stakeholder. Sometimes you do, but they're kind of like the middleman between what the stakeholder or the constituent wants and you. And so they're helping you kind of formulate the bill. And a lot of them are former legislators or former staff of the Ledge building, and so they know the process very well. So it's a wealth of knowledge. I know you always hear about evil lobbyists. These evil lobbyists. Well, not all of them are great, but most of them are very, very good at giving information and providing you information. And as long as they're honest with you and truthful, then they're a great asset.
And there has been some scuttlebutt that there was more of a national presence on national lobbyists that were in this session. Did you experience that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
there were definitely.
I know you have no
issues,
experience
Right.
on previous
On
legislative
the big
sessions.
issues, I think that was certainly the case. We had a gun bill that came early on. That was obviously a national agenda issue. So you saw a lot of the push from the national agenda or from the national realm. I think it's those big issues, right? Those big issues that are often the divisive ones, right? Yeah. That you see more on the national level.
Yep.
But I feel, I just wanted to add in, I mean, the one thing that these national organizations do is they do a good job hiring people who are local. So I never felt like there were these big Washington, D.C. lobbyists in our building. I felt like most of them were very local to Nevada.